December 26, 1900. Joseph Moore rowed a small boat to the base of a cliff on Lan Moor, a slab of rock 32 kilometres off the Scottish coast. He climbed 45 metres of stone path to the lighthouse at the top. The gate was closed, the entrance door was shut. Inside, the clock had stopped. The beds were unmade. On the table sat a meal no one had touched, and a chair lay overturned, as if someone had stood up fast. Moore called out. No one answered. 3 men had been stationed on that island. Not one of them was there, and on the hook by the door, one of their oilskin coats still hanging, in December, on an exposed Atlantic island. Someone had left without it. You're listening to The Unlit Room. Every story in here actually happened. That's the part that should scare you. New stories every day, Monday through Saturday. Today, 3 lighthouse keepers vanished from a locked island in the dead of winter. Their bodies were never found. The Flannan Isles sit in the Outer Hebrides, a chain of uninhabited rocks battered by the North Atlantic. Lan Moor is the largest, barely big enough for a lighthouse. In 1899, the Northern Lighthouse Board lit the Flannan Isles Lighthouse for the first time. It was built to protect ships from the very thing that made the island dangerous, weather that could appear from nowhere and hit with killing force. 3 keepers rotated through the posting. James Ducat, the principal keeper, was 43 and experienced. Thomas Marshall was his assistant, steady, methodical, the one who kept the log. Donald Mac Arthur was an occasional keeper, a seasoned mariner filling a rotation slot. They weren't amateurs. They'd spent their careers on exposed coastlines. On December 15, 1900, the steamer SS Arctur was sailing from Philadelphia to Leith when it passed the Flannan Isles. The captain looked for the light. It wasn't there. The lamp that was supposed to burn every night, guiding ships through some of the most dangerous waters in the North Atlantic, was dark. 3 days later, the Arctur docked at Leith, and the captain passed his report to the Northern Lighthouse Board. Something was wrong on Lan Moor. The board dispatched the relief vessel Hesse per Us from Brest-Clet on the Isle of Lewis. But the weather wouldn't cooperate. Storms battered the coast for days. The Hesse per Us couldn't sail. 11 days. That's how long the keepers, or whatever was left of the keepers, were alone on that island between the light going dark and anyone reaching them. 11 days of Atlantic winter, with no radio, no way to signal, and no one coming. Micro Cliffhanger 1. On December 26th, the storms finally broke enough for the Hesse per Us to make the crossing. What Joseph Moore found when he reached the top of the cliff would become one of the most enduring mysteries in maritime history. Moore was the relief keeper. He'd done this before, arrive by boat, climb the path, swap in while someone else shipped out. Routine, but as the Hesse per Us approached Lan Moor, the crew noticed things that weren't routine. No flag flew from the flagpole. It should have been raised to signal the relief vessel. No provision boxes sat on the landing. They should have been laid out, ready for the supply drop. No one stood at the entrance. Moore climbed alone. He found the gate closed, the door shut. Inside, the lighthouse was intact, but abandoned. The clock had stopped. The beds were unmade but hadn't been slept in. A meal sat on the table, cold, untouched. A chair was tipped over as if someone had gotten up in a hurry. And then the detail that turned confusion into dread. 3 oilskin coats should have hung by the door. Only one did. 2 were missing, meaning 2 men had grabbed their weather gear and gone outside. But the 3rd coat still hung on its hook. In December, on an island pounded by the North Atlantic, someone had walked out into the weather without their coat. Micro Cliffhanger 2. Moore searched the rest of the lighthouse. He searched the island. He found no trace of any of the 3 men. But when he reached the West Landing, the platform facing the open Atlantic, he found something else entirely. The West Landing was destroyed. Heavy iron railings, built to withstand decades of Atlantic storms, were bent and twisted by some enormous force. A supply box that had been bolted at 33 meters above sea level had been ripped from its position and smashed. Ropes were tangled around the landing crane, and above the landing, turf had been torn from the cliff top at over 60 meters elevation. 60 meters. That's roughly the height of a 20-story building. Whatever hit that island had thrown seawater and force higher than most people will ever stand in their lives. The official investigation was led by Robert Muirhead, superintendent of the Northern Lighthouse Board. He had a methodical mind and limited evidence. No bodies, no wreckage from the keepers themselves. Just an empty lighthouse, a ruined landing, and one coat still on its hook. Not everyone agreed on what happened next, or rather, what had happened before Moore arrived. The Northern Lighthouse Board's official conclusion, issued in 1901, was straightforward. A freak wave struck the west landing while all three keepers were outside securing equipment. The wave swept them into the sea. It accounted for the damage, the bent railings, the displaced box, the torn turf. But there was a problem. If conditions were severe enough to produce a wave like that, why would all three men go outside? Lighthouse protocol required one keeper to remain inside at all times. These weren't trainees. Docat had decades of experience. Some historians proposed an alternative. One man was caught by a wave while checking the landing. A second rushed out to help, grabbing his oilskins on the way. The third heard the commotion and ran after them without stopping for his coat. A rescue attempt that became a triple drowning. It explained the missing oilskin. It explained why experienced men would break protocol, not out of carelessness, but out of desperation. But it also meant that three seasoned mariners were overwhelmed in sequence, each one watching the man before him disappear. Both explanations fit the evidence. Neither one is comfortable. And then there was the log. Thomas Marshall's final entries described weather unlike anything he'd seen in 20 years of keeping lights. He noted that Docat, the principal keeper, the most experienced man on the island, had been very quiet. And MacArthur, a tough, seasoned sailor, had been crying. A man who'd spent his life on the open sea, weeping inside a lighthouse. Whatever was happening on A.Y. Lan Moor in those final days didn't just endanger the keepers. It broke something in them. The log doesn't say what they saw. It doesn't describe the wave, if there was one. It just records three men, veterans of the Atlantic, coming apart. __BREAK _1 C835B25 __. The detail that changes the story isn't the damage or the theories. It's the coat. One oilskin still hanging by the door. In December, on a rock in the North Atlantic, one of the three men went outside without protection against the cold and the sea. Either he chose to, rushing to save someone, or he was pulled from the lighthouse so fast he never had the chance to grab it. The first possibility means he knew he might die and went anyway. The second means he never saw it coming. The Northern Lighthouse Board searched the island. They searched the surrounding waters. They found nothing. No bodies, no clothing, no wreckage. The sea had taken everything except that one coat on its hook. The last piece of evidence that someone had left in a hurry and never come back. Over a century later, A.Y. Lan Moor is automated. No one lives there anymore. The light runs on its own. But the question hasn't changed. Three men who understood the ocean, who respected it, who'd built their lives around its rhythms, vanished from a locked island without a trace. The sea offered no explanation. It never does. It takes what it wants, and it leaves behind just enough, a stopped clock, an untouched meal, a coat on a hook, to make sure you never stop wondering. Some disappearances aren't mysteries because the evidence is missing. They're mysteries because the evidence is all there, and it still doesn't add up. If this one kept you up tonight, good. New stories every day, Monday through Saturday. Subscribe so the next one finds you too. Follow the Unlit Room wherever you listen. Tell a friend, but maybe don't tell them it's all real until after they've finished. Full story on the main channel. Follow if you're wide awake. That was the Unlit Room. See you in the dark.